It's thundery and rainy here right now, so
Oh, it's never thundery and rainy here,
uh,
or very rarely.
yeah. All right. I believe we are now live. So, to all of the world that is joining us out there right now, I'm Tracy Wiggins. I'm the director of percussion here at the University of North Alabama. And we're now doing the fourth of this weekly series that we've probably, with some copyright infringement, dubbed Chopping with the Stars. And this version around is going to be with Mr. Glen Crosby, who, if you have anything to do with the marching arts, you probably know this name and have seen this guy with many marching groups over the years, from the Cadets to the Blue Devils to the Vanguard to our one glorious year together at the Freelancers, and he's been with the Blue Knights and everything else. And he's pretty much a guru of all of the things. He's now currently working with Pacific Crest, which I'm going to kiss up to him a little bit. I thought was one of the coolest shows that I saw last year.
Yeah, thanks.
I absolutely loved it. So he's going to take you through just some basic technique things and some chop out exercises and stuff. What I'm going to do is, in the chat for the streams of this on Facebook and YouTube, I'm going to put up a Dropbox link so anybody that's drumming along with us can get access to these materials as we go and everything. So on that note, Glen Crosby.
All right. Thank you so much, Tracy. It's great to be here. Hello to everybody out in the internet world, the online universe where everyone is now all the time. Fortunately or unfortunately, it is what it is. So anyway, what I'm going to do today, I figured, because I have no concept of how many people are going to be on and what level we're at, so I tried to find some middle ground where I can do some pretty standard things I do when one of the first couple lessons I have with private students. There's a set of exercises that Murray Gussick had put together with me about 9 years ago for the academy. And a couple of them we started doing things that were exercises. We gave them 3 different layers. There's like your basic hand-to-hand one, double stops, and then some kind of combination that combined the two. And it seemed to work really well. So I've been using these for actually a really long time now. And it seems like they're good enough for, even with beginners or less experienced players. They're still useful for them, and obviously more functional for the inexperienced player. But if you got some chops, if you're not feeling your forearms hurt by the time we get done, then we didn't do enough. So I'll try and do it where we'll go through like chunks of these exercises slowly, get through them at a medium or slow tempo, and then we'll take it up a little bit, so at least everyone can get some kind of a workout, and we'll talk about technique as we go. And of course, any questions, please ask away. It's really weird for me to be online doing this. I prefer to be in a room where I can see people and interact with them and get questions and kind of see, how you guys are reacting to what we're doing. So the more questions, the better off. So a quick overview. I mean, my whole approach when I start with students is really to start big and kind of go from there and then whittle things down and refine it. Because I think the biggest thing that we need to teach is rebound. The most basic concept for almost any percussion instrument, to get rebound and to get wrist chops. So, I mean, when people play eights, we want to incorporate, number one, everything needs to be completely relaxed from your neck, shoulders on down, and then through the large muscle groups in your forearms, into the smaller muscle groups in your hands and fingers. All those are useful. So over time, over the last 40-something years I've been doing this, I've gone from, starting out where I was taught and it was using mostly a front fulcrum, and then eventually it's gone back and forth, and I've tried every iteration of any kind of technique that I can find. And it just seems to me, just try and incorporate every single muscle that's available to you, and then you adjust to whatever instrument you're on. If you need to play a French grip, you're still, able to do that, or a German or American grip, whatever people call them now. This should function, hopefully, in any environment. That's the idea behind the technique, is to find a middle ground. So you play as efficiently as possible, and if you change instruments, you have the ability to go on instruments that have a lot of rebound or no rebound because of the way your hands actually function. All right, so the first exercise we're going to do is called single, double, triple. It's your kind of standard double beat exercise. It starts out with 8, 8, 16, 8, 8, 16, 2 bars of 16th notes, and that takes us up to letter B. So what I'm going to do is I have a met right next to the microphone. I'll put the met on at a certain tempo. I'll count it off, and away we go. Does that sound good? Can we do that? All right, I've talked enough. Let's play. And we don't want triplets. All right, so we'll start out at 100 for this. And we'll go from the top to letter B. So what I'm looking for, or what I'm hoping you guys can get to, and traditional grip players, we'll do a little bit of that. My traditional chops are not as good as my master chops, but what I want is to get a full wrist turn, have the arms involved without getting too crazy for right now, but just incorporate the arm muscle, a full wrist turn, and let the stick rebound fully. As if you're bouncing the ball, everyone has all the usual metaphors that they use, but it should feel effortless at the same time as feeling like you have complete control over what you're doing. There's a really, really fine line when you're playing, especially when you start playing faster. Too much pressure chokes off your sound. It does all kinds of weird stuff to it. So a lot of this will be really understanding how to find that middle ground and be as efficient as you can be and feel like it's completely effortless at the same time. All right, so here we go. Letter A to B. 1, 2, and 1, 2. Nice full wrist turn. Same thing, ready, again. Sorry about that. One more time, ready, and. All right, simple enough. So one thing, just as far as listening, simple exercise. There's nothing difficult about that, but this is the time when you get your ears tuned up. A lot of what we're doing today, I like to call a lot of these exercises kind of long tones for drummers. So you see a trumpet player playing a B flat and just working on tone. That's kind of what these exercises are for, too, to get consistent sound out of both hands. So even while you're playing eighth notes, listen to the sound of your right hand. Listen to the tone of your right hand compared to your left hand, especially traditional grip players. Especially traditional grip players, because chances are, if you're using this much arm, I'll give you an example. Playing eighth notes on your right hand. If this is pivoting that much, there's no way your left hand is going to match that sound, because you're already at a disadvantage playing this way. So you got to use your ears to make sure you're developing sound and getting the same kind of quality and tone out of both hands, which would apply to any percussion instrument too. All right, so next section. Now we get into the double beats. We'll try and move relatively quickly. All right, so next part, same concept of one right hand, one bar of right, one bar of left, two bars of right, one bar of left, one bar of right, two bars of left. So this sounds like this. I'll play it once and then we'll do it. Everybody, 1, 2, right, yeah. Right, C to the end. All they're doing is groups of 3 now. Basically enough, right? Here we go. Everybody, 1, 2, C to the end. Oops, excuse me, my bad. 1, 2, all right? And. sound, especially with the left. All right, cool. All the way through, top to bottom. We'll do it at this tempo once. We'll take it up 10 clicks, 10 more clicks, 10 more clicks, and we'll stop at about 1:30. Then we'll go on to the next thing. Here we go, beginning. And any questions? We good? Thumbs up. Give me something. All right, cool. Well, 1, 2, beginning. Ready? And. All right, cool. So a couple simple things real quick to listen for, especially on the groups of 3 in terms of sound quality. It's easy to have like a little natural decay happen when you're playing groups of 3. That's exactly what, from my standpoint, I don't want to hear. I want to hear nothing but sound and the same sound. So be careful you don't hit the first note of each group any harder than the 2 notes after. Tendency usually is to hit the first one harder. You start getting an accent. I would rather hear, again, same tone. Tone, touch, consistency on every single note, because that's part of your ear training. So when you're getting into music, you actually hear exactly what you're supposed to be looking at on the page. All right, now, before we speed it up, look at the middle line. The middle line is double stops. We'll start at letter B. Letter B, the middle line. So it's all. And then so straight up, and again, everything, think about if you're starting from a playing position of where your top height is, and you're trying to get back there on every single note. So when you get to the, when you have a bunch of notes in a row, really play with light touch. And if you feel like you're pressing on the sticks, try and release the pressure on the fulcrums so you have the exact same height. Not, all right? That's how we develop wrist chops too, which will help you playing on a keyboard instrument, just have wrist chops like that. All right, so double stops, letter B to the end. Here we go. And a 1, 2, a 1, 2, ready, and. One more time. So even after a couple of reps of that, if you're really actually manipulating rebound as much as you can and getting every note up as high as it needs to be, that should get in your forearms pretty quick. You should start feeling that up in this area if you're actually really working the muscles and getting the wrist chops opened up as much as possible. All right, now, just real quick, let's go back to the top line. And we're going to play it faster. Top line, so we'll do the hand-to-hand version this time. One more time. Here we go. And 1, 2, and 1, 2. Sorry, my bad. Beginning. 1, 2, and. Cool. Now, you got a question?
Yeah, we've got a question from someone who you know pretty well from marching next to him, Mr. Neil Flum.
Oh, no.
It says, do you have any advice for developing better control and quality of sound for lower level playing, say around 3 inches, which seems to be the Bermuda Triangle of drumming for many percussionists?
Yeah, we'll go through that real quick. Actually, we're going to do, like what I was saying before, a lot of what I do is I really, like all my students, I keep them playing big for a while until they actually really understand rebound and feel comfortable. And then from that point, because even playing big, I try and emphasize not opening up the hand too much. Like it's rebound, wrist, and the finger support, but not doing this where it's like kind of separating the motion of the wrist with the fingers. So when this happens, that causes trouble. So then it's a matter, if you still have the stick kind of close to the palm of your hand, but it's loose and you have control, you can play taps. You develop that. There's the one exercise, tap pyramid, that goes alternating strokes, doubles, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64 on each hand at piano. And if you can play that, actually it's a good test. If you can play that at 100 beats a minute, your technique is serving you the way it should. And you'll be able to play at low levels and have control, because you want to still be able to have a small wrist motion and have everything relaxed. And if any kind of pressure down low, again, changes it, and then the fingers start going, and then the stick has to recoil, and it's harder to keep heights down and get any kind of articulate sound. So really, understanding how to use the fingers for support without opening up so much is one of the ways to do that. And even this exercise that we just did, if you're playing double stops at piano, it functions like all these exercises can be played at all levels. And the motion should feel pretty much the same. It's just a smaller motion. But the way the mechanics work, at least the way I teach, is just to try and keep it as close to the same as possible. So you're making minor adjustments, or real subtle adjustments based on what you hear, and not having to think you have to use more finger or less finger or more wrist. It's just, if you have all the muscle groups working for you, it should be, your brain will tell your hands what to do, as long as you've taken the time to get those motions. And that's another thing too about just the way the brain functions. You have to break those motions down slow enough so the message that gets sent from your brain to your hands is crystal clear. That's why instructors tell you to play slow. It's a scientific fact that will get you to a better place over a long period of time. Because whatever you play, whatever glitches you may have when you play slow, they will be there when you play fast. So if you take the time to be meticulous, when you're playing fast, your brain's already got the motions figured out, and you'll play more accurately, and you'll hear it. Too, it makes it kind of the idea of getting into a zone, where you're playing something, and it could be the most difficult thing you're playing, but everything kind of slows down, and you can hear every single note and know exactly what you're doing. So, kind of a long-winded answer, but. Anything else? Any other questions?
Nope, not so far. That's it.
Okay. So real quick, we'll do the bottom line of this really fast because we're going to run out of time. I knew I had way too many exercises, but I always operate that way. So now all we're doing is adding in the notes that aren't in the one-handed or the double stop pattern. So the pattern stays the same, and you fill in the left or the right hand with the notes that aren't in the broken up pattern. So you have. You get the idea. The second half kind of turns into a partial stick control exercise. All this is stick control anyway, so let's just try that. So all you're doing, it's the same pattern, just fill in the notes on the opposite hand. One, 10. All right, here we go. I want, this is the bottom line that we're doing, the bottom line. I want from letter B. Let's start at letter B. And I want 2 to the end. I want 2. Time, ready, and. All right, any questions on that one? And again, you can play these all at every dynamic level. I just start out just to get the wrist chops and some flow and hear tone from hand to hand and get your ears kind of into the long tone concept. So you're actually, like, don't ever take an exercise, eights, whatever it is, for granted. It's a time to get your mind focused and to listen to the sound that you're producing. And obviously, the more you can listen to the sound you're producing when you're playing simple rhythms, that will translate into you hearing your sound when you play more dense rhythms. Simple, right? But it's important to do that, and it's just a focus thing, being able to stay focused for longer periods of time. So if you show up for a rehearsal and you're not quite ready, try and get your mind focused before you start playing, and just use the idea of what do I sound like right now? What do I really sound like? And you have to dig in 3 or 4 layers to really start understanding what your sound is and what tendencies do you have. You got to discover those before you can fix anything, and that takes time and effort. And these are the most important thing you have is your ears. Right, so be aware of that. And protect them when you're playing on a drum.
Hey, Glenn, we've got another question from Mike Terranova, where he asks, during all of this, while you're doing the stick control stuff and everything, do you float the opposite hand?
I've seen variations on this. I mean, for me, the most obvious thing is I like to keep the hands almost moving all the time. I don't like where stuff gets downstroked too much and it stops when it's unnecessary to do that. For me, that creates awkward sound and it disturbs the flow of the rhythm. So almost like, I mean, I think a general rule, I know this goes way back too, is like just have whatever hand is playing usually moves about an eighth note before or somewhere. Now there's a natural movement that just kind of happens. Like I've seen people even on the stick control like floating it way up, and I'm not a fan of that, but you know, because it creates a weird sound. But usually about an eighth note before. Like I wouldn't go, because that creates an awkward sound too. That's the whole thing, is being aware. I think your hands will do naturally what's right if you're listening to the sound that you're producing when you play those isolated notes, to get the same touch on those singular notes as you're getting on the groups of 3 or doubles or whatever. So that just takes, again, I would use my ears as a guide and then just kind of see what the hands are doing. But for me, I like to keep almost constant motion going.
And then one other question related to this, real quick, from Mr. J. Kenneth Green Jr. He says, "How do you use marching exercises and concepts to introduce books like Stick Control to your younger students?"
Say it again.
How do you use marching exercises and concepts to introduce books like Stick Control to your younger students?
Oh, the Stick Control book is opened up immediately, even with beginners. That book, I just, because they don't have to be able to read. You teach rebound, put the sticks in their hand, tell them how to hold it, get a concept going of what, just, how your wrists move, how sticks rebound, and then the Stick Control book is opened up immediately on page 1. Because actually you can get them, you're kind of teaching them how to read a little bit. You're saying, all right, it's the same thing, but all they have to do is read the R's and L's. So you can go, okay, get started on that. And then from there, I'll start going into like this exercise. I try and go at things like a few different angles depending on how the student reacts when they first start. I don't think there's never a one size fits all. So I'll do an analysis of what, some kids just have more natural ability for whatever reason, their hands move better. Or they can read quicker, or they just pick up concepts. So it's a matter of, do I need to demonstrate more and have them just play along with me? Do I have them read a little bit more and do both at the same time? It just depends on the individual, really.
All right, that is it for the moment.
All right, now let's see. I'm going to skip a couple things here. Let's go to. Well, let's go through the stick control exercise real quick now that we just talked about that. We'll do stick control and then basic strokes, and then we'll do a roll exercise, and then I'll probably do the milk bone, that 2-height exercise last. We'll keep all the up exercises in order. So speaking of stick control, let me get that one up. All right, so this exercise actually is used by a lot of people, and I can actually say with some confidence that this was taught to me, the first 8 bars of this was taught to me by my instructor named Rick Waggle when I was 14 years old. So this has been with me for 43 years. And it's been modified. Murray Gussick added some cool stuff to it. There's many variations of it, but the standard first 8 bars was something that was given to me when I was a teenager, and it's just stuck with me. It just works as far as gaining coordination and starting to get some balance with right and left hand. So again, we're listening for quality of sound, tone, and balance in both hands. So we could probably just do, we have a check pattern, sticking pattern, check pattern, sticking pattern, check pattern. And it's 3 rights and a left, 1 right and 3 lefts, groups of 4, and double strokes. So let's just go ahead and do that. I don't think we need to break this one down, right? I think we're pretty safe on this one. All right, here we go. First 8 bars. 1, 2, nice tone and touch. 2, ready, and. Same thing. All right, now the next part, there's 2 things you can do on the page that you have. It's just straight 16ths. There's also the little groove bar that everyone plays where it's an accent. So you have an accent on count 2, downbeat, count 2, and count 4, and then all the other 16 notes are on the left hand. So then back to 2 counts of each pattern. Then one count of each. So when you play the last 2 bars, you have a right-hand dominant version of 1 count of each pattern, and then that automatically shifts back over to a left-hand dominant version of the last bar. All right, so let's go, let's just do the whole thing, because it's 30 minutes in already. Here we go, whole thing. 1, 2. So that one, it's the same thing. It's about tone, touch, long tones. You're trying to get the exact same sound out of every single note that you're playing. And it's way more difficult than it seems that way. Especially any of the single, like we already talked about the single stroke patterns. It's so easy to have that just be an accent and kind of just let that go instead of having, right? And groups of 4 instead of. So that's the kind of things I look for in that exercise, is to get tone all the way through. And again, the ears will dictate whether you're actually achieving that or not. So, all right. Let's go to, any questions on that one? We good? All right, cool. Basic strokes. This is an interesting one. There's sometimes I've had some even, mid to high-end players that struggle a little bit with this exercise. Let's do about 150 or 60. So don't worry about the time signature. It's not that big a deal. I'll just play the up to letter B one time. So it sounds easier than it looks. If you look at the time signature, it's like, oh no! So don't worry about that. So the struggle with this sometimes with some players, and it actually kind of goes back to the question about how the hands move. It's easy on, if you press down and play even a somewhat of a downstroke, it really can disturb the rhythm. It's difficult to play. So you really have to play off the drum, and there has to be a constant motion of this back and forth. So we'll see if you're struggling with that. The problem is you're downstroking one of the notes, or that's most likely what the tendency is, instead of letting it and having a constant movement back and forth. All right, so we're going to repeat each little section too. It repeats halfway through. So let's do that. I'm going to go a little quicker. Here we go. Top to B. 1, 2. Now 180. Same thing. 1, 2. Same thing, pretty straightforward. It's good for wrist chops. It gets hands moving side to side well. The bottom half of that is kind of like a semi downstroke part. We're going to skip that because we don't have enough time. But the idea with that one is going, again, getting the motion going back and forth. And then, so there's a little bit of a stop motion in that one. It's not quite as flowing as the other one, so it kind of trains you to play half downstrokes if you need to. And then the last pattern is there's like a little inverted roll pattern. So go ahead and check that one out on your own. Any questions on this one? We good? All right, let's go to giblet rolls. Let's apply all this now. I'll apply all the double stroke stuff to your standard triplet roll exercise. All right, so a lot of times when we get into playing rolls, especially when they're faster, the one thing I try and really do is train students to put as little pressure on the fulcrum early on, and really try and find, as we're moving up in terms of tempo, where you actually need to start putting a little bit of pressure on the stick. And I try and just say minimize it as much as possible. Gotten the point, especially when you start getting older and your hands start getting, older. You can't, any kind of pressure can do some damage to your hands. I've got, I have this knuckle that was broken when I was in 7th grade when me and my brother got in a fight. So this is probably going to get arthritic at some point. And my left hand, I did something to the index finger like 25 years ago, and I can feel it now. Just from not warming up and playing, and I felt a twinge, and now I know that that's still there. So, as you're moving through, your career, if you end up being a percussionist and playing, the rest of your life, or if you're just playing for the rest of your life to have fun, take care of your hands and learn to be as efficient and as light as you can, and you can still get plenty of sound. That's the one kind of misnomer about playing this particular style, is that it's kind of fluffy and light, and no, it produces a ton of sound when you want it to. And it allows you to play extremely legato or extremely staccato, depending on what the music tells you you're supposed to do, because still, music will dictate technique always. If you play, if you're a drum set player and you're going to play jazz like you play rock, you're not getting any gigs. So, you want a technique that you can easily, we talked about this at the beginning, easily move on to another genre, any style of music, and know exactly what that feels like in terms of the way your hands have to move and the way your soul is when you're playing the music too. All right, so with this one, you want as open a sound on the doubles as you can get. So what I'm always shooting for is basically, if I was playing single strokes, and we'll get back to that after we get through the exercise too, to try and match that sound so you have absolute clarity. And it's much easier to fix your problems when you really can hear every single note that you're playing. So if you feel like you're pressing down on the double strokes, try and just relax with the fulcrum where it is again. It's like, even if I go right up here, a lot of times I'll say to a student, like they're holding a stick like this, and I say, all I want you to do is this. Just release the pressure. Keep everything into place that it already is, but just have no pressure on the stick. As long as your fingers are wrapped around, or with traditional grip players, if the thumb is in place, that's all you need. So when we get to rolls and it starts getting faster, automatically people start, pressing on the stick. And that's diminishing your sound on top of everything else too. So the first 6 bars are standard. We have a check pattern, double on the first partial, check pattern, double on the second partial, check pattern, double on the third partial. So let's just go ahead and go through those. And what you're trying to get, again, is it's a long tone exercise. You're trying to get the same quality and touch, tone, everything as you're going through this. And we'll do this nice, comfy, 130. Middle ground. Here we go. 6 bars. 1, 2, 1, 2. One more time. So again, before we go on, when I'm playing those, there is no pressure in my hands at all. Nothing. It's strictly muscles manipulating the wood, creating energy, and just, the fingers support the wrist. and I'm trying to listen, so if I come down the first note of the double, I want that second note to speak equally to the first note, or as close as you can get. Now, realistically, if you have a slow motion camera, which I've done, and slow mode myself playing doubles, you're never going to get the second note exactly the height of the first one. It's not possible. But as far as your listening goes and hearing that, you can get pretty close. There's definitely a difference between playing really, really open and off the drum, or any little movement down can mess with the rhythmic interpretation and close it off. And just the quality of sound gets kind of weird and tight. And it's just not, it doesn't carry as much. And especially now with, the size of marching bands or drum corps and the way the visual programs are, drum lines are like sitting, center field or in the back hash. And when you have to, when you got to produce some sound, you got to produce some sound. There's no messing around with that. If you're competing with, it used to only be 64 brass. That was the standard number. Now it's 80 or 85 with everybody. So, like, there's no way you can compete with that unless you really have an understanding of how to open up your sound as much as possible. All right, so now, the next 6 bars, we're just adding doubles. So that last one is just dig it up, dig it, dig it up, dig it, dig it up, dig it, dig it up, dig it up, and it has a little lilt to it from right to left. So keep that flowing. Questions? Can we just do it? Next 6 bars. Let's go from the top to there. Top and stop at 13. Here we go. And 1, 2, 1, 2. Last time. All right. Simple enough. The last 4 bars is just check pattern, long roll, check pattern, long tap roll. Simple enough. All right. Let's go ahead and do the whole thing a couple times. Actually, one time at this tempo, and then I'll take it up to 150 and 170, just so we can get, for all you fighter pilot snare drummers that need some speed, we'll get in there in a second. All right, here we go. 1, 2, whole thing. 1, 2. $150. Now again, there is at 130. There is no pressure in my hands whatsoever to play those rolls. It's all rebound and just using the energy that's created. Now we'll see if I have to put any pressure when we get to 150.
Glenn, real quick, a question that actually relates to this. Kyle Blair says, what do you say to students who just try to pinch the stick to get the doubles? They can't seem to relax their arms and fingers.
Yeah, that goes back to like all these exercises that we've done. These are the ones I use for every single student that comes through. And I tell them immediately that this, that exercise, stick control, all those, I tell them immediately, that's going to relate to the way you're going to play rolls, to get that in their head immediately. So, like, and taking the time to build up, like 130 is easier to not put any pressure. But it comes down to, understanding, if you're playing front fulcrum, which I did, 30 years ago, then once you start pushing there's your nerve tunnel into your wrist, where you get carpal tunnel syndrome if you're not careful. All right, so any pressure there does this, it locks the wrist, and then you're forced to kind of open up your fingers and push like this and push down with your arm. So you're not allowing the stick to do the work. You're forcing. And then, it creates a pinched off sound like the question actually said already. But really, you got to from the beginning of understanding how to play double strokes and make sure you say this is how you apply it to playing rolls, and nothing should change. Okay? All right, here we go. 150. And 1. Oh yeah, and this is still at forte. One thing I don't ever do with my groups, unless it gets extreme, is say, all right, well, we're at a certain tempo now, let's just bring the heights down. It's like, no, this is a workout. This is supposed to challenge you. So, I mean, stay as close to forte as you can. So, you know, I want to see everything moving. When I'm working with a group, I don't say, this is supposed to be a chops exercise. Here we go, whole thing. And 1, 2. All right, so at that point, there's a tiny little bit of pressure. I'm still pretty much putting no pressure on the sticks to play at 150. All right, let's go to 170. There we go. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so when I get to 170, I start putting pressure on sticks. And what I found myself doing is to avoid, like, kind of go back to that question, to avoid the front finger, just emphasize, man, the middle finger is the strongest one that you got. Try and move your fulcrum point back to the middle finger when you're playing the rolls. And that immediately releases, you can still use your index finger as a, that small muscle to help move the stick. But if you can anchor more around the middle finger, then it takes pressure off the wrist. So you can still keep turning your wrist and it doesn't go from this to like all arm where you're kind of pushing down. And there's gonna be pressure. It just, it depends on people's chops and how you actually develop your technique. But to keep a really open sound at those upper tempos, you gotta be as efficient. It's kind of the same thing, if you're running a 100-yard dash, in the Olympics, you're not gonna tense your muscles up the faster you run. You have to be completely loose to be at your fastest or at your peak. So the concept still applies to playing drums too. Now that exercise, another thing that'll help the sound and the chops is playing the entire thing single strokes. And the last one's a little weird. You got to go, like, there's no double strokes anywhere in the exercise. It's just right, left, all the way through. So it takes you left hand dominant, and that last tap roll has to be to get that one in. All right, let's try a couple bars at a time. Now, this same thing, there's no pressure needed on the sticks for this. It should be all up and tons of rebound. So you'll know if your coordination is lacking or your left-hand dominant side is weaker, this will tell you right away when you get to the left-hand dominant rhythms. So let's do, we'll definitely slow this one down. 130. All right, so we will try the first 6 bars again. So the first double pattern or drag pattern will be right hand dominant, second one will be left hand dominant, and the third one will be right hand dominant again. Here we go. 1, 1, 2. One more time. Right. Simple enough. That should feel all effortless, and hands are just flowing non-stop. Next ones. Was there a question? No, we're good? Okay. So these next patterns get a little more difficult. The last one especially is, so again, if you play even the remotest downstroke at all, it'll stop your hands from going and playing that pattern. All right, so let's try those 6 bars now, starting on the 5 strokes with the check pattern first. That is 6, measure 7.
Hey Glenn, real quick, I'm assuming that when you use this with a line, or if you use the single version with a line, do you intermix that with like having some play the doubles and some play the singles, just to kind of like check out the rhythmic integrity and stuff of everybody?
Actually, this is one of those things I use in lessons. I don't really. It would be cool to have. I think with PC, once we get if we ever get back to doing what we're doing, it's something we could do at some camps just to see who can actually do it. It's more. I usually use it more just for getting balance in both hands. So it's like, I mean, I'm ambidextrous, so I'm kind of lucky that way. Actually, apparently, I started writing with my left hand in kindergarten. They switched me to my right hand, so I got all kinds of weird contradictions about how I do right and left hand stuff. It cracks me up, but it just makes it easier because I'm that way. It feels totally natural for me to go right to left hand. That's why I like doing stuff like this, because I see how a lot of players are so right hand dominant. It's like, nah, man, you got to open up the other side of your brain too and get both sides moving. And it changes everything when you can do that. It makes everything easier to learn, and you really start hearing your sound a lot more too when you pay attention to that. So, all right, here we go. So, and the 4 bars after that. Here we go. And 1, 2, 1, 2. One more time. All right. So last 4 bars, obviously just long rolls. Last 4 bars. 1. So really make your the weaker hand or the less dominant hand follow the dominant hand. So on the first one, next one. It's easy. Most students, when they try it, they never play the right amount of notes on the left-hand side because your brain's trying to get you to end on the right. It's trying to take it back to right-hand dominant because that's what you're used to. So, all right, here we go. 4 bars. So 1, last 4, 2, 1, 2. Last time. Whole thing.
One more question we've gotten so far from Neil Landini. He
Okay.
asked, do you connect this to triplet stick control?
I'm not sure what that means.
I'm guessing like taking this and making it into like a tripletized version of stick control or something like that.
Actually, a friend of mine just did that with one of his high school lines. So he had it. He took the same patterns and. So that's one thing that you could do with that, yeah. Whew, it's getting warm in here. All right, whole thing. We'll do it once at 1:30, then we'll just try and burn it. I'm not sure how fast I can play this, so I might humiliate myself if I take it too fast, but we're just gonna go for it anyway, just because why not, you know? One time at 1:30, all the way through. 1, 2, 1, 2. All right, let's see if I can do this. Help me out here. Give me some good energy. You guys, you fighter pilots should be able to play this without any problem. Let's see. All right, we do it. Here we go. 1, 2. So that's, I mean, with those ones, that's like, it's a fun one to do, number one. It creates more balance in both hands, and it gets that sound in your head playing singles. So when you go back to playing doubles, it'll be really obvious if you're doing anything to choke off the sound when you're playing doubles. So it's kind of ear development, ear training at the same time.
So Neil has come back and clarified his question a little bit. He said, when he was asking about do you connect this all to triplet stick control, he said he was meaning all of the lead hand motions of the singles.
Yeah, okay. It is the same. It's the same kind of movement where it's more. You know, I've heard people talk about, you know, really just working on playing from up here, like the timpani technique from up in this, and you're coming back to it, and that makes sense in terms of always trying to get back to the same height and getting that to work for you. But in drumline, obviously, we start here, so you got to kind of negotiate your way between those two. So it's the same technique. You know, it applies directly to that, as does the double strokes too. Like the touch basically should be about the same and the same amount of pressure on the sticks. Like playing singles right there, there's zero pressure on the sticks. It's all rebound and using every muscle that's available to you and just gaining, you know, the wrist chops to get the big stroke going. And then the fingers just support that. So, oh man, we're out of time.
We can go a little bit longer.
Okay.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, because on that note, one of the things that I remember, I think it was you or Ralph, or maybe both you and Ralph used to talk about a lot, was the whole all strokes are created equal kind of idea. Yeah.
Uh-huh. We kind of, you know, even way back then, and then after teaching Murray Gussick for a bunch of years in Santa Clara and all the stuff that he did, still, it comes down to, you know, I've said this a few times already, having a middle ground for technique so that you can easily manipulate it to what the music tells you to do. So finding that space where you have complete command of what you're doing, but you're completely relaxed and efficient while you do it. And that way, you know, playing, like if you're in a drum line playing in a ballad, playing a long roll, as opposed to, because the music is more angry. You have to know how to adjust that. And even though, like, especially the way snare drums are tuned now, marching drums, I mean, it seems like you can't really change the sound, but you can. The way you hit it, even though it's a flam head, there's still different sounds you can get depending on how you tune, what you're trying to portray in terms of performance. All that changes the sound that you're playing with as a musician. So, I mean, it really is just trying to get, that space where you can go any direction. It doesn't matter what angle you need to take in terms of music. Your hands have the ability to do that, is what we're trying to get to. All right, we'll do one more. Milk bone. Now this was an exercise that Murray Gussick had put together, again, for Academy. And 2/8 exercise, so we're dealing with taps and accents finally now. But playing a downstroke, so we're playing an accent like we're playing 8 notes. With this exercise, the accents are all on the last partial of every rhythm, and I'll explain why that is in a minute. But just for the 8 notes, playing a tap and an accent. Now, when the accent comes back down, call it downstroke, control stroke. There's a number of ways that people define it. The way I try and teach this, is as a stick, legato strokes, constant motion, and if you're playing a bunch of legatos, you play one downstroke. Nothing should change. The only thing that happens is after you strike the drum, you stop the stick. And that's something that takes a little while to develop, because a lot of people, when they know they're going to play an accent, sometimes they'll pinch around the thumb and do weird things where there's already tension in the stick because they know they have to play the low heights. The heights have to be exactly right. So it changes the approach, and it comes down, and it can distort the rhythm, and all of a sudden the accent has a different quality to it, and it can distort the tap after it because there's too much tension. Because if you're squeezing the stick and it comes down, then you have to release that to play a tap. Because if you're hanging on the stick, you're going to produce no sound at all. And then you lose the flow of the rhythm if you're just playing. Any kind of tension in playing a pattern like that creates a little gap where all of a sudden the actual rhythm gets distorted. So again, it's really important to keep a consistent kind of flow in the hands when you're playing a pattern like this. So let's just run this through. It's 4 bars of 8 notes, 4 bars of 8 note triplets, 4 bars of 8 notes, 4 bars of 16th notes, all with accents on the last partial. Now, the thing that always gets people is that your brain wants to hear downbeats. And it seems like a simple exercise until you have to play 4 bars of something and have the tempo or have the time not move at all, and have those accents actually land exactly where they're supposed to land. So you have to use the accents as a pickup note to the downbeats and actually listen to the metronome and see, am I spacing those rhythms correctly, depending on what we're going through, whether it's an 8th note triplet, or 16th notes. So we'll do this one at a little below 90. We'll do like 86, 85. Bop, bop. All right, so the whole top line. This is another one that has 3 layers to it. Top line, and 1, 2, ready, and. Simple enough. Another aspect of that is you can use, as you get going faster, like if we say use the triplets for an example. There's an element of molar that you can use here without actually playing molar. I had a conversation with a great jazz player, Jim Chapin. Older gentleman. He just passed away in the last few years. He was in his 80s, but you would always see him walking around everywhere with sticks and a practice pad. Like you never ever saw him without. So he was a genius. He actually studied with Moeller. So I saw him at a NAMM show one time, and he was standing by himself. So I said, "All right, there's some wisdom to be gained here." I made a beeline over to him, just asked him. I said, "What's the foundation of playing Muller?" And he said one sentence. Said, "The arm generates the motion of the wrist," and that's all he said. I was like, "Okay." So I started thinking about it. And when you're playing an accent pattern, people talk about like the whip and everything, and get kind of, for me, a little bit overdone on how a Muller stroke can be used. But I thought, I'm going, okay, so if we're going to apply that to like rudimental playing, you can still apply the idea of this muscle starting the motion of the hand going up. So, like on the 16th notes, that little bit of help from that large muscle gets the upstroke to happen a little bit quicker, and it keeps the flow of the rhythm. So when you're playing 16th notes, or when we play the bottom line of this, you keep everything flowing. So you can, and it takes pressure off the wrist again, or that pinch in the front part of the fulcrum, because the wrist has to stay limber, right? And that was his whole thing. He said, "I've never had tendonitis in all the years that he played," which was 70 or 80, I guess, or whatever it was. But so when you're playing this type of pattern, or any kind of accent pattern, you don't really have to bend the wrist, but just the idea of having the arm throw the wrist up that way keeps it flowing. Right? So let's go to the bottom line. Double stops obviously will help you, get hands balanced, and when you're playing double stops, really there's a very definitive feel when you really play a double stop well. Any little flam drives me crazy when I'm doing it, and I can sit there for hours just going, all right. That's when I'll start messing with, what every single muscle is doing in both hands, and try and get that to be exact. So if you're going to play this too, it's like, okay. So now, bottom line, we put the two together, and you have for 4 bars, 4 bars, back to 16th notes, and then 4 bars of 32nd notes. So let's try that. We'll keep it the same tempo. All right, bottom line from the beginning, straight through. 1, 2, and ready? And. So that's that one. And it's really easy, especially just the transition from the 16th notes to the 32nd notes is always where I really have to pay attention. The first count, because any kind of tiny little shift in the speed, and you get digga 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 digga, and you can hear the met changing all over the place. You got to be super dialed in and consistent with your time. And it's more obvious when you're playing the last partials of an accent pattern than first partials. So your brain, it can get fatigued. And again, if you're not used to doing things where you eliminate downbeats, your brain is used to wanting to put everything on a downbeat or more things on a downbeat. So when you start playing those patterns for 4 bars, you're trying to get it, you'll find yourself trying to shift the accents back to a downbeat. All right. So it's developing focus as well, just to be able to do that. So any questions on that one?
Not so much on that one, but we do have a request to go over a flams exercise.
I have a basic one.
Yeah, in fact, the request was specifically flams, 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 exclamation point.
All right, let me pull up 8th note flams. Where'd you go? There we go. All right. I can be kind of a stickler for flams. I know with everyone at Pulse, when I was working with them, they were warned if I was showing up for a section, if they were working on flams, that they need to sound a certain way.
one important question we need to fit in here also from Dr. Elliot Cleveland
Okay.
is he needs to know, are you a Toronto Raptors fan? Because this is important to know.
You know what? I haven't. Yes, I mean, especially last year, my brother was a fanatic. I mean, being a hockey guy from being back in Toronto, I haven't watched that much basketball over the last while. My brother got tired of dealing with the Maple Leafs because I haven't done anything in like 50 years. He's going, the heck with the hockey team. He was all over the Raptors. He told me early in the season, going, you watch, they're going to win this year. And I was like, nah, really? But then you watch them play, it's like, man, they were a team. They played really, really, they had their superstar, but still, they really played as a team. So, yes, I am.
I'm sure Dr. Cleveland is happy to know that now.
Absolutely. All right, so with flams, we'll do this pretty quick. I don't see the point of playing a flam if it doesn't sound like a flam. So flat flams drive me crazy. Actually, that's not flat. I like just enough separation, so it's a texture. And you have to regulate it when you're playing in drum lines. To actually get that together is not easy because there's no real definitive way other than the way it feels to get just enough separation. And it can't go too far. It can't start getting into this unless you're smart enough to get 10 snare players to play that, which I would be amazed if you can, and I'll pay you money for that one. So the exercise is just, it's an 8-note flam exercise I used in 1988 for the Santa Clara Vanguard. And then Murray took the idea again and expanded on it. So the whole thing just goes through, now that's slow, obviously, but for me, the easiest way to teach a flam is one hand comes up, both hands come down. A lot of times people, when we're playing flam, you can see the one hand and the main stroke come up, and then as this is on its way down, the left hand, the grace note tries to attack like almost past the tap height. And that can end up in extremely flat flams or even an inverted flam if you're not careful, especially when you're first teaching a younger student how to do that. So I try and incorporate into just saying the grace note, without getting crazy about how low it needs to be, just make sure it goes straight down with maybe a tiny motion. So when the main stroke starts its path downward, and then translate that into, so you can hear some separation. On flam drags and everything else, you can still hear a flam. Okay, so that's, and again, it's too easy to let them slide. It's like, to me, it doesn't make any sense to try and play flam patterns if you really don't want to hear flams. I think some people actually just play them tight too. It's like, that's fine. That's just not my preference. I want to hear an actual flam. So I'm kind of out of time now.
One last thing related to that is Elliot again asked about how your difference between like straight flams versus floppy flams to you. Like how do you handle, or what do you do with that?
I guess if you're thinking playing hand-to-hand flams, that gets into almost like a Moeller technique. It still comes back to me to the foundation of the technique. It might sound like I'm playing kind of staccato. I'm putting no real extra force behind anything, It's just about the spacing, where the grace note is. But you still feel like, a good strong legato note, or if I'm playing hand-to-hand, it's a controlled stroke without being, really stiff when you come down, and definitely not letting the thing completely, go out of control either. A middle ground. A middle ground, so again, if you're playing a passage that needs some hand-to-hand flams, you can play them loose. And if you want, at the end of an angry phrase, you understand how to adjust that too.
Awesome. All right, do we have any final questions from anybody in here in the actual Zoom call at the moment? Bueller?
Come on.
Bueller?
At least one question. Come on.
Somebody's got to have something.
Yeah.
Oh, now they're all being shy. All right, well, I think that is all the questions that we have in all of the chat things, too. So do you have any last words of wisdom for all of our viewers, especially the students and like the high school students and stuff like that that are out here watching this?
Yeah, and even for the instructors, too. In the world that we're living in right now, music has to be an escape. Everything I teach right now is to bring joy to the students. I don't put a lot of pressure on them about, you have to practice this. I don't want it to feel like a class, like a math class. Music is fun to play. It has a healing quality to it as an individual, for people to listen when you're playing. There's so much good that all of us can bring to the world right now that I think it's really, really important that we focus on that. So when we do get back out and play, for me, the competitive aspect is not something that's in the forefront of my approach anyway. And right now, especially, the only thing I want to do is be able to get outside with groups and play for people and try and create some healing in the world right now. And music is going to be a big part of that. So, as far as, why you do it, have the motivation behind you to do what's right and what's good for you and people around you. It's really, really important right now. There's so many things, everything's going on is so much bigger than playing a paradiddle or a good flam or anything. But at the same time, we can bring a lot of healing and happiness to the world through music. So if I was going to say anything, and when you feel stressed, if you're a drummer, go play. Even when you don't want to, the best thing you can do sometimes is just sit down and just work on something. Read, play along to tunes, find the best music. I listen to so much music over the last few months. And sometimes I just obsess over, I've been obsessing over Snarky Puppy and the offshoot bands from Snarky Puppy. There's one called Bocante, Bokante. Check out some of the stuff these guys have put together. I can sit and obsess about just those tunes. And it changes my vibe, Take yourself away from the negativity. So when you have to go deal with it, you've given yourself some space to actually kind of recharge. Then you can get back to, changing the world or doing whatever it is we need to do right now. But there's lots of work to do. So, be good to yourselves, be good to the people around you, be patient, and take advantage of playing, because it's playing, the word play, It's like going outside and playing in the yard.
So one last question that BJ Rommel got in here. What is a good suggestion that you would make to students that can help them play at faster tempos without stiffening their arms too much?
Number one, play way more reps at a slow or medium tempo and work out the muscle movements that you need. And again, not putting full compression and having a majority of your reps be there. So when you get to the point, you got to find where your ceiling is and push yourself. And as soon as you feel tension, take a step back. Don't allow that to happen. So you're moving in incrementally up to when you're playing super fast. And as long as you're using your muscles efficiently, when you play faster, that should help. But a lot of times with students, when I have my students all the time, I drive them crazy when I say slow down, and then they really hear what they're doing too. And it's like, I don't have to tell you where the glitches are; they're right in front of you. You can hear that now because you're allowing yourself to play at a slow enough pace that you can find that stuff. And it creates more efficiency. There's a great book called The Talent Code by a guy named Daniel Coyle. I highly recommend it. It'll explain everything about how the brain functions and why practicing slow works and what that does, in terms of when you get to the point where you're at your peak and playing fast.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Glenn. It's been great. And I think this will be live it'll still be on the YouTube page, so anybody that wants to go back and refer back to it can and stuff like that. Next week, we have on Derek Shannon, who has worked with several groups, Phantom Regiment, Madison Scouts, is now with the Blue Knights. And so I guess the closing wrap-up thing I would say is to follow up on what Glenn said is be good to everybody else. Be good to other people out there, because it's really, really important right now And there are a lot of people that can't seem to find that charge in their lives at the moment.
Yeah. And I admire the young generation right now. I am a huge fan of the younger generation.
Yeah, they're getting work done right now.
Oh man, it's the first time since the '60s that there's been a generation that's doing what they're doing. So I applaud the young generation. I love you guys, man.
So, thank you to everyone that is tuned in, and we'll see you next Monday with Derek Shannon. And thank you so much for doing this, Glenn.
Oh, my pleasure.